In this simulation, we are going to explore how ions are formed. Atoms are electrically neutral. They have no charge. However, ions have a charge, and this charge can be positive or negative. These are two atoms, sodium and chlorine. Sodium atom has 1 electron in its outermost shell. Chlorine has 7 electrons in its outermost shell. So, sodium atom needs to lose 1 electron for it to have a complete shell with 8 electrons. However, chlorine needs to gain 1 electron and have 8 electrons in its outermost shell and therefore completing its shell. So, what happens is that 1 electron from sodium is transferred to chlorine atom, therefore forming a sodium ion and a chloride ion. Sodium atom lost 1 electron. So it lost negative charge. That's why sodium ion has a positive charge. However, chloride ion gained negative charge. So it's a negative ion. This is another example. So we already know that chlorine has 7 electrons in its outermost shell and it needs to gain 1 electron to complete its shell. Magnesium has 2 electrons in its outermost shell. So what's easier, losing those 2 electrons or gaining 6 electrons to complete its shell? Well, the easier thing to do is losing those 2 electrons to complete its shell. And what happens is that magnesium transfers 2 electrons, 1 for each chlorine atom. And therefore, you see the formation of chloride ions and magnesium ion. Magnesium has lost 2 electrons, therefore it has a positive charge. So as you see, when metals react with nonmetals, electrons are transferred between the atoms you start with. So from those examples that we just saw, decide whether the statements below are generally true or false. Metal atoms lose electrons to form positive ions, or metal atoms lose electrons to form negative ions, which is true and which is false. Excellent! Metal atoms lose electrons to form positive ions, and that's what's happened with sodium atom. What about nonmetals? Do they gain electrons to form negative ions, or do they gain electrons to form positive ions? That is correct. Nonmetal atoms, like chlorine for example, gain electrons and they form negative ions because gaining electrons means that they gain negative charge. So what we can conclude is that metal atoms lose electrons to form positive ions. However, the atoms that gain electrons are nonmetals, and nonmetals form negative ions.